Hey, Andy, how are you?
Oh man, so glad you could join us, man.
No, thanks so much. This is just what you want to be doing right before your Friday begins here, or weekend begins.
That's right. Hey, what time zone are you in? Are you in Mountain Time?
I'm Mountain Time, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I thought we were gonna get your partner in crime to join us too, but it sounds like he's like we'll put it on your shoulders. So
Oh, yeah, the poor guy. Well, he had COVID and then he's had heart issues after that. So,
oh
gotta
man.
love COVID.
Oh yeah. How would you say you and your family have navigated it?
We've done okay. Yeah, we've just tried to stay away from all of it, and and we've been doing everything virtual, as you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
So
Oh man, yeah. Have you been in that chair in front of that
yeah,
camera like a lot, right? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I got to tell you, Adrian, you and Chester and Anthony have written a really good book. I mean,
Oh, thanks, Andy.
and the timeliness. I mean, I think in some ways you could say Carrot Principles timeless. And I suppose this one is too, but for this time, right? I mean,
yeah, no, I mean, in a way, it was lucky we were already working on it. In a way, yeah, I wish we hadn't had to have such a timely subject, but
well, yeah, for sure. Yeah. But so anyway, I look forward to the conversation about it. Just to just let you know a little bit of background, most of the listeners are in some sort of project leadership role. So project managers or frontline leaders, sometimes mid-level leaders, but are around the world, and they're really interested in practical ideas. So that's why I like having this conversation with you, because that's you keep it very, very practical in there. And yeah, and we don't have any specific time frame that we have to hit. So
I noticed that some of yours are 20 minutes, some are 35. I guess you can accordion, huh?
Yeah. And it's really allows you to elaborate as much as you want to. Okay, so
cool.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And just to check levels, do you have a favorite verse or proverb these days?
Oh, gee. Well, let me just kind of think about a little of the anxiety at work stuff. Okay, so you normalize, you destigmatize, you empathize. It's not I'm strong and you were weak. It is that's pity, not empathy. You're getting a good enough level here.
Absolutely, that's good. Although I was just going to let you go for a while, man, because that was so good. So,
all right.
I like the quote from one of the people you interviewed. That's something along the lines of, "If you don't struggle with anxiety, I can't remember exactly how it ended, but it's like you're not self-aware enough or something.
Yeah, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
I thought that was an interesting one.
There's a great one in here. Let me see if I can find it really quick. It's an Egyptian proverb. I don't know if you remember this one. A beautiful thing is never perfect.
Yes. Yeah. Is that the truth? Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that one. That's for sure. Yeah. All right. So it will be released audio only. So and so you know that. But I like keeping the cameras on just because it usually keeps the conversation going a little bit better. But all right. So we are recording. Things look good in this end. All right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Hi, Andy. You don't need me to share statistics to be convinced that we live in anxious times. Living through a global pandemic, well, that's part of it. But there's so many other factors that make anxiety a force that needs to be talked about. Yet there are countless reasons why we don't. I mean, if I talk about my mental health struggles, maybe people look down on me, or maybe I'll miss out on opportunities. And from a manager's perspective, there are all kinds of reasons why you may feel this is something you can't bring up with people. And all the while, we have workplaces where people are struggling on their own, impacting their own well-being, and likely also impacting team's well-being. Well, today we're taking on the subject of anxiety at work, and I'm excited to welcome Adrian Gostick to the conversation. Adrian and his co-authors Chester, Elton, and his son Anthony have written an insightful and timely book entitled Anxiety at Work: 8 Strategies to Help Teams Build Resilience, Handle Uncertainty, and Get Stuff Done. In today's discussion, you'll hear what the duck syndrome is, and you'll immediately recognize it in your own life, I'm guessing. You'll hear Adrian discuss why we can't just blame the pandemic for anxiety at work. Some of this is on us as leaders. And more importantly, Adrian will share specific strategies to help you and me lead through uncertainty and deal with overload and push back on some of that perfectionism that might just be driving some of that anxiety. I can't wait to share the discussion with you. A special thanks to all of you who have left 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts recently. A username Bosch from Canada and Kamalisa from the Philippines and Snores Rotunda, what a username that is, from the US. Just a few have left reviews. thank you. We're in the top 50 all-time management podcasts for a good reason. And it's because of you, your enthusiastic feedback with these reviews. So thank you so much for helping get the word out. Well, let's jump into today's discussion about anxiety at work. Adrian, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Hey, Andy, I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks so much.
Oh, man, I'm so glad you're able to carve out the time. I look forward to talking to you about ideas in the book. It's a good book, and we're just barely going to scratch the surface. But I'd like to start with you, Adrian. Whether recently or years ago, have you ever personally struggled with anxiety? And if so, how would you describe your personal journey dealing with it?
No, it's a good question because I don't think I'm probably as self-aware as I should be, and many of us aren't. That there are times that, you notice in your background, wow, I looking back, I see I was really on the edge there. Because sometimes we get all these ideas confused. Like there's worry and there's stress and then there's anxiety. Worry, we focus on a certain event. Stress, it starts to affect our physical being. But when we push it to an anxiety disorder, that's when it really starts to take over us. And sometimes many times the anxiety can continue well after any crisis is gone. So I have had, some anxiety in my past. Where it really came out with is my son, Anthony, who you mentioned did help write the book. He's 25 now. He's been a genetics researcher, really bright young man. And when this first started coming out in his, early years, we did what a lot of people do, which is, hey, buck up. You just got to plow through. We do these knuckle-headed things because that's how we did it. And by the way, it doesn't work. If somebody has a real anxiety disorder, telling them to, calm down. There's a famous saying, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And yet those are the silly things we do because we've always done it that way. So, when I had anxiety, you plow through. Doesn't work with somebody who is in a clinical level.
Yeah, that's so good. When I was in my late 20s through early 30s, Adrian, I struggled with, I think it went over the line into that anxiety because there were times where it felt overwhelming. Here's the crazy thing. I don't think many people around me knew it. And I was performing well enough to get promotions and I was so miserable and overwhelmed. In many ways, I was living the duck syndrome. So would you tell us about this idea of the duck syndrome and why it's important to understand?
Yeah. And I wish you'd done your homework before I came on, Andy. It's like, it's so disappointing. This is so awesome that you've actually, read the material, such great questions. And I knew that about you coming in, that you were a great interviewer who really does your background. So thank you for that. And the duck syndrome is really interesting. We found this first at Stanford University, where the students came up with this term. Now, high pressure university, but all the students would say, look, you're supposed to look like you are just floating along like no troubles in the world because you want to get picked for that next, great job, etc. But under the surface, you are paddling like mad just to stay afloat. And well, how often is that happening in our work worlds where, in fact, the recent surveys show only 1 in 10 employees say they would feel safe talking about their mental health with their boss. This is what you talked about earlier, Andy. It's like, well, I might not get that, good promotion. I might not get that plum assignment. And worst of all, if I do tell my boss, there's a very good chance he or she will just spread it around. So there's a lot of reasons that I withhold my mental health from my manager, and it's incredibly unproductive, in many cases damaging, because people aren't getting the support and empathy that they need.
Yeah. So it's probably worse of a problem than what we even realize. And I think this last year hasn't helped. I mean, the global pandemic, but even before COVID, there was plenty of disruptive change going on. And some, maybe, I don't know, do you think it's fair to say, you say it in the book in some ways, that maybe the mindset is they're just not tough enough these days, right? But you make it clear in the book, we could easily miss the role that we play as leaders in being causes of workplace anxiety. And you've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what are some of the mindsets that can lead us into making things worse, maybe without even realizing it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, one manager told us as we were doing research, and we did interview dozens of managers, as well as probably almost 100 Gen Z millennials coming into the workplace. So really some interesting perspectives. But one manager told us, look, he says, honestly, we've used anxiety as this weapon to get people to perform better. We want them to be amped up, and and it's like it's often the deer in headlights where people, yes, some people will respond to anxiety for short periods of time. Others will freeze. Others will flee from the situation. That's what we're finding. Right now, the surveys show about 75% of Gen Z say they've already left a job for mental health reasons, about 50% of millennials. And we're just seeing those numbers go up, as you just mentioned, with this pandemic. Right now, according to the US Department of Labor, 42% of people in their 20s, of all people in their 20s, have a full-blown anxiety disorder. So one of the really interesting things we found in our research was we interviewed these young people. They tell us, we talk about this all the time. I mean, like all the time. You guys, you oldies, you never talk about it. We have to bridge that gap.
Yeah. I remember your leader saying once, Adrian, well, I think they've hit their lid. It's almost like they're not cut out for it. I think it's a phrase used in the book, right? Yeah. They've hit their lid, and yet is it as simple as that? Like, or I don't know. Do you hear this? Well, actually, it's in the book. It's not my job. It's not my job to have these kind of conversations, right?
Yeah. And then, I know you have a lot of project managers who are listening, and especially if these people don't work for you, well then, hey, it's not my job. And our managers will say, look, I'm not a therapist, but if you will have them on your project, if you are leading them in any way, even if they're coworkers, it really has to become our responsibility. We have to change this mindset if we want to keep people, and we especially want to keep them engaged in your project. Well, who are you going to do better work for? The person who is empathetic, who understands and really builds you up, or the person who is oblivious to these ideas? Well, what we don't understand, I guess, is that, a lot of people we've talked to think the old mindset of leading with fear is something that was something we did 20 years ago. No, unfortunately, our surveys show about a third of managers are still seen as fear-based managers by their employees. And it's not that, they got the stogie and they're yelling at people. It really is that they lead by fear in, I can't guarantee jobs. Maybe they're insecure themselves, and so they spread that. There's a lot of ways that they create fear-based environments. And the worst is that they do not take into account what people are feeling when they're coming into the workplace, that they really may be having, anxious issues that we need to address.
Yeah. I heard a CEO once say, she said, I'd rather be feared than revered. And it's cute, but it's one of those things that mindset, you can just imagine how that oozes out in all kinds of different ways, right? Oh, yeah. And like you said, that's been a mindset at times of, if we really push people, you shoot for the stars, you might get to the moon, and all the other stuff, but you lose a lot of astronauts on the way, maybe. So, I've heard. I
love that idea. Like this CEO told you that. I mean, can you imagine anybody walking down the hall? That's Susan. Oh my gosh, I hate her guts. Can't stand her. But boy, sure do respect her.
Right.
Anybody saying that? No, of course not. What we forget is how tied those are.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it said that the mother of all fears is the fear of the unknown. And in your book, you talk about how uncertainty is a major driver of anxiety. So what are some strategies that we as leaders can use to try to lead through uncertainty? Because it's not going away after COVID goes away, right?
No. And it's so important too, as you look at projects, because every project is uncertain. Of course, you all know that, and all your listeners know that a project by its very nature is uncertain. And as leaders of those projects, we have to remove as much uncertainty as possible. But of course you're going, but the project is uncertain. So this is really kind of has a dichotomy that's going on here. So as a leader though, you can take more risks than the people within the team. So there's a couple of things that people really want to know when they're working through this. First off, where are we heading with this project? That's a simple thing, and things will change, but as long as you keep communicating with me, that's what I need to know. The second is, how am I doing? Am I contributing? Am I making a difference? Am I valuable to this team? And the third is, do I have a future here? Can I grow? Can I learn new things? Very simple questions. And yet sometimes we feel like, we don't really need to explain the why, but the people on the team don't have the why that you do as the leader.
Yeah.
And so those simple little touch points as we go along the way are really important. And instead of setting the big goal, you set the small incremental goals along the way. When I took bowling in college, because I had to have that half credit class, the professor, if you can call him a professor, first thing he did was to teach us, you don't aim at the pins. You aim at those arrows. They're about 15 feet in front of the foul line. You get your arrow right, you're going to hit your pin 9 times out of 10. Well, the point for all of us as project managers is that we can't shoot for that long-term goal. You've got to find ways at every step. It's a weekly goal. It's a monthly goal at the very most, where you're reinforcing people and what they're accomplishing. You're bringing down anxiety levels, and you're really helping people understand the impact they are making.
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to be a better bowler because of this conversation. So thank you very much. But yeah, I feel like the uncertainty chapter had a lot of stuff that just reinforced just good management. Good leadership is going to help with this anyway, help people focus on what they can control and offer constructive feedback and help them know expectations, things like that. But one that I thought was interesting was about the grip. That I think when there's uncertainty, I may tighten my grip. That's not what you say in the book, though, right?
I love this story. This is Nicole Malachowski, who's the first female pilot in the Thunderbirds, the Air Force's fighter squadron. They do all these tricks. And one of the things that Nicole told us, she says, I've been an accomplished fighter pilot, and she says, I make it onto the Thunderbirds. First time we're up, we're practicing in formation. We're flying 400 miles an hour upside down. She says, and you're in the air, you hit turbulence. It's just inevitable. Yeah. And first thing I was taught is you tighten up on your grip. She says, but we land, and one of the other pilots pulls me aside and says, Nicole, nobody has told you. She says, but when we were flying in formation, you tighten up on your grip, you're going to kill us. You create what's called pilot-induced oscillation. He says, you actually have to loosen up on your grip. It's 2 fingers on the stick. And she goes, well, that's counterintuitive. He says, I know, but I promise you, it works. And so she says, I learned this idea that when times get tough and you have to actually loosen your grip. Now, that's counterintuitive for project managers who are very organized, very analytical in most cases, that when we get into a stressful time, you have to actually take your hands off the stick and just trust your team. There are times where we do micromanage, but there are also times, especially in crisis, where you have to loosen your grip. The problem is in our surveys that most employees say when things get tough, my boss becomes more demanding, more micromanaging, and it makes me, shut down, makes me freeze up. It is not helpful.
I think it's such good advice. I was talking to a director level guy once, and he was saying, we're so far behind schedule. I'm making everyone do daily status reports. So just think about that. Now, isn't that like tightening the grip? And the ironic thing is, I'm making you do something that's keeping you away from the work too.
Yeah.
But and yet he had good intentions. I think when we think, we have to tighten the grip, just like that pilot thought. And how advanced was she that she still had to learn that even in her advanced training, and we have to learn that same thing as well. Yeah, and I feel like it had a little bit. That has some carryover to your chapter on overload, because I feel like your overload chapter is the price of the book. I mean, just pay for the book to get that chapter. This week I asked 2 groups of leaders, how realistically could they sustain the pace that they're on currently? And easily more than 75% of them said it's just not possible. They just can't. So what are some common myths or misconceptions about overload?
We started out with an interesting story in that chapter about the Navy SEALs, and you had a chance to hopefully kind of go through that. It's really interesting. There's a couple of archetypes of people who make it to the Navy SEALs that they're already top of their game, and they're the types that look at the big picture, and they sort of, okay, what have we got to accomplish, in this entire 7 days of hell week that they have to go through. And there are others who just go task by task by task, the plotters, if you will. Mm-hmm. And as they've been studying which group makes it through more? The optimizers who look at the big picture versus the taskers, those plotters. They found almost in every case, the people who make it through the most stressful situation imaginable are the plotters, are those people who just take task by task by task. And you think about that, and it's just what we learn in psychology is we bring ourselves back to the moment. We bring ourselves back to, okay, what have I got to accomplish in the next hour versus, what's my week look like? And I'm looking at the big picture and I'm creating more anxiety and stress in myself. So I think that's really one of the first things we think of with overload is, and marathon runners or triathletes know this too. You don't think about the big race. You think about that next telephone pole that's 200 yards away, and you work toward that, and then you work toward that rise, and then you work little by little and you eat the elephant. Mm-hmm. And so there are ways that we talk in the overload chapter about, things that you can do. And, one of the simplest things is, I love your example of, I want daily check-ins. Well, no. But what we find, especially as the project is beginning or a new employee is coming on, maybe a weekly Monday morning check-in. What have you got on your week, Andy? Great. Okay. Let's prioritize those. What's critical, what may be able to be bumped off, and then to be realistic with people. One analogy we use is, look, it's like boxes on a truck. You can only put so many boxes on because that's your hours in your week. When something new comes, what are we going to take off? And you help people, especially as the project gets rolling or as somebody is new in your team.
Yeah, that's good. I really appreciate that Rita McGrath illustration there. Mm-hmm. I remember that one. And by the way, on the Navy SEALs one, I guessed wrong. You teed up as a question. Is it the optimizers or the taskers? And I thought, of course, the right answer is going to be the optimizers.
That's what everybody guesses.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? What it reminded me of, sometimes, at least when it was the most difficult days for me, and I've heard this from other people, some days it's put one foot down, put another foot down, take one step. It's like that, the next telephone pole thing, like you said, that sometimes that's what we need to make it through. And I'd actually like to take both sides of the table on the overload side. Like, let's say on one side, we have the manager who's managing a team that's overloaded, like whether they know it or not. Okay. They might be aware of it or they might not be aware of it. And on the other side of the table is the direct report who's feeling overloaded.
Yeah.
And so you've already given a little bit of advice for both sides, but would you take another swing at it? Like, is there anything else like on the manager side of what I can do to be careful on this one, not to not increase anxiety at work? And on this side, if I feel like, I don't know if my manager is getting it.
Yeah. No, it's a tough one because if trust does not exist, it's a really tough one. You remember in the book, we used an example, and one was Rita McGrath, who was able to go to her manager when she was feeling overloaded and said, okay, if I allow you to give me this project, this is what has to go on. And the manager just didn't know. Mm-hmm. And so the first part is, if trust exists, and so this really is contingent upon the manager building a trusting environment. But even not, it is to be able to let that manager know, this is what I have. I need your help in being able to then reprioritize, because things do happen. I mean, every week we get things thrown into the works. And it really is a process then of creating open communication. So as long as the communication is flowing and we're able to talk and reset, if you're playing a game, there's always something that comes into the mix that will, you see a new defense or the rain starts coming, something is going to come up. And so, like in business, you've got to be able to have those honest conversations to be able to say, I need help. Mm-hmm. And then the manager in turn has to be able to say, we're going to reward people who ask for help versus the other way around. So many environments where, people are terrified to say, I am overwhelmed. I do need help right now, because there are these bubbles. And so you got some people who just take it on. They work 70-hour weeks every week, and other people go home at 4 and they're quite happy. A good manager will balance that out. Mm-hmm. But also it's on the employee to say, hey, look, this doesn't seem right now. I need to help balance.
It's such a good answer, Adrian. You know what I love about the Rita McGrath story is she didn't come off like a whiner in that one. Yeah. Like, if I remember right, her senior was just saying, hey, would you take the day to walk somebody through the campus or, show them around? And she was, if I remember the story right, she's like, I will. I'd be glad to do it if that's what will best serve our mission. This is what won't get done. But it was back to the truck. We can take some stuff off and put that on if that's the best. So we don't have to come off as a whiner to advocate for ourselves. In a sense, we're advocating for the organization, really, and for ourselves, right?
I love that. Yeah, no, and her example was just ideal, because you're right. She wasn't coming across as a whiner. She said, the mission of the organization, is this going to best serve it? And as the manager evaluated, he went, no.
Yeah. And the other thing in that chapter, and I don't remember who the person was, but it's something like the American Psychology Association, something like that. But he had this quote that was something along the lines of, people need time away from work, but they also need time away from thinking about work. Wasn't that something like that in that section?
And yeah, I mean, good for you. I love the things that you pull out, Andy, and that's really important, because what happens is, and we've all done this, we all do this, is like, oh, you think of something as the project manager, you think of something on Saturday, I'll just send that to the team, or I'll send that to Susan because she needs to know about this. And so what happens is Susan gets that email, and what is she thinking about all the rest of the weekend? Oh my gosh, yeah, this. And there have to be times where we don't think about work, and it takes discipline on our part, where we can put that in, but we put the timer to drop Monday at 8. There are times where there's 911s, of course there are, but 9 times out of 10, or even 99 times out of 100, we're doing these things because it's on the top of our mind, so we send it. Right. And it creates anxiety, and it creates a time where people cannot recharge. So I know it sounds like a cliche of this R&R, but psychologists, you're exactly right, are finding that this is really important, not to just have downtime, but to have downtime where there is no even thinking about work. That's taking it to another level.
And so that's like you said, it's really both sides there. So it's us not inflicting it on them, but it's also kind of us walking away. And do you ever, I feel like during the pandemic, because the office is at home, like you don't walk away from it. So is there anything you do yourself, Adrian, to I'm going to try to shut it down, because there's no shortage of work for you, right? I mean, so anything you try to do yourself?
No, it's a silly little thing, but there are some little rituals you can create. Like, even if I'm working in my home office and I'm going into the other room where, boom, I'm back into the, family world, I can just turn around and say, stay. And it's a silly little thing.
No, I like it.
You can just do little things that say, okay, that's off, no more. And, even on the weekends, I will mute all my, all the work associates. Don't tell them, but I'll mute all the work associates, so their texts don't ping me while I'm, watching Netflix and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
You just have to do a few little things to keep your sanity and recharge for the next day.
Yeah, that's good. I like it. Stay. Your chapter on perfectionism was a gem as well. And I'm curious, do you by chance have, I feel like the quality of what you and Chester do is so high that you've got to have a perfectionistic streak in you, or else you're surrounded by those. So if you do have that streak yourself, how do you manage perfectionism so it doesn't add anxiety for you, but also for your team? Because you can easily bubble that over to your team, right? So what do you think?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think if I did have perfectionism, I've sort of worked it out of my system where, I do reiterate, do iterations of things, but but I've also realized, and there's the graph, and many project managers should know this graph, where you get to good, then you get to great, and then getting from great to perfect requires an infinite, sometimes, amount of iterations and an unnecessary amount to get from great to perfect. And yet, look, a lot of project managers are perfectionists. And so we have to watch that in ourselves. Now, my son, Anthony, is the one who took the lead on writing this chapter, because he admits it in himself. He's a scientist, he's done every chemistry course, every, genetics, bioinformatics course. And he says, look, I admit it, I am a perfectionist. And he wanted to take the lead on this, because we have seen it. In fact, we were just doing a presentation this morning to a bunch of healthcare folks. And I thought, well, in healthcare, there's probably, maybe you want perfectionism, but we were hearing so many people spoke up afterwards saying, this is one of our biggest issues. We can't get people to get started. They are so afraid of mistakes. And in healthcare, you actually have to act. And so I was really surprised just to hear that from them. But this is something that you have to be aware of in yourself. And of course, as you know, in the book, we offer a lot of ideas. But what was really surprising, as we've been presenting this information now for a few weeks, as the book is coming out, is how many managers, how many managers go, really? This is a problem? They've really never seen it or thought about it. Yeah. But as they start digging in, and especially as they start talking to younger people, they realize this is a huge deal.
Yeah. You know, we had a guest on that said there's a difference between perfectionism, or actually in her case, it was micromanaging and being nitpicky. And I think we could tie it in here. And I don't know if I struggle with perfectionism at times, but I think I'm overly nitpicky at times. And maybe that's just, you know, rationalization, and it really comes down to that. So your section on good, when is good enough, I thought was really good. And I also liked you had some advice on just discuss it openly. So I think it might be fair for me to say to my team and just go, listen, here's the deal. I get nitpicky sometimes, or I get kind of perfectionistic sometimes. Remind me if you feel like I'm going over the line of good and good enough. I mean, that's, I think, the sort of dialogue you're asking people to have, right?
It's a great point. I mean, because when I was first a manager, you want to control everything, because as an individual contributor, you've been really good at what you do, or they wouldn't have made you a manager. So I come in and I want people to do the same quality of work that I did. And you know, my mentor told me at that time, he said, look, if somebody can do it as 70% as good as you, let them do it. Don't interfere. If it's below that, that's when you start managing and coaching and helping them get up to the level that you're looking for. And it takes a lot of understanding and empathy and ability as a leader to be able to do that. But you've got to see it in yourself. And this idea of nitpicking, nobody wants to be micromanaged. Maybe in my career development, you can manage me closely, but not in my work. I mean, nothing will push away somebody faster than that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's not a surprising thing to me that you had a chapter on gratitude, because of course I feel like that's such a key part of your message. But what are some ways, like some practical ways, that we can use gratitude, not in general, but specifically to reduce anxiety at work?
No, thanks for asking about that. Yeah, because we do love gratitude. It's been, even in our surveying, we do a lot of surveying. Chester and I, we do a lot of survey for companies that they want to improve their employee engagement scores. And it's really interesting as we go in, we know that there's a couple of simple, low-hanging fruit things you can do before you really dive in. One of them is giving employees a voice. The other is amping up the level of gratitude you're giving to your people. So it not only will build engagement, but it also brings down anxiety. And there's a couple of reasons. The first is we all want validation. I don't know if you remember in the book, we actually quote the great Oprah. And the thing she said was one of my favorite quotes in the book. She actually says, look, we all want to be validated. She says, I've conducted like 35,000 interviews in my life. And after every single one of them, doesn't matter if I'm interviewing a housewife or a hero, every single one of them turns to me and says, was that okay? And she said, I heard it from President Bush, President Obama. I heard it from even Beyonce with all of her Beyonce-ness. She said, everybody wants to know, did you hear me? And did what I say mean anything to you? And yet what we found is that as we interviewed so many of these younger people, especially high achievers, it was an amazing correlation between high achievement and anxiety. In fact, many people who with high levels of intelligence and drive have the highest levels of anxiety. In fact, that's many cases what drives them to produce so much. And yet many of them suffer from what we call imposter syndrome, where, they're feeling like, well, they're eventually going to find me out, that I'm not as smart or talented as they think I am. And so when people feel like frauds, it's not just about intrinsic motivation, it's about extrinsic, where we as managers can really help people feel like they are valued and that their specific work is really contributing to the success of the organization.
Yeah, so good. One last question. We've got a lot of parents who listen to the podcast, and I suppose in many ways this book wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Anthony and his journey. Yeah. But any advice you'd have for parents of either things you've done or you've seen friends and colleagues do to help try to help kids have a healthy relationship with anxiety, let's say, and build resilience, not only now, but also into adulthood? Any ideas?
No, it's such a good question because both Chester, my co-author, and I, we've both had kids with anxiety and clinical levels of anxiety. And the first thing, unfortunately, many of us do is you try to force the, you got to tough it out kind of mentality on. And this is a different world. You have to get educated. You have to find help. You have to find a therapist that'll work for your kid. It may take several tries. There may be medication that's involved that can be very helpful. But the most important part is kindness, is understanding, and it's being empathetic. Empathy means that, I'm really getting in touch with your side. You may not understand exactly what they feel, but you've gone through hard things yourself. And that's what they're going through right now. And so, sympathy is, oh, bummer. Empathy is, I know I've been in hard times before. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Let's work on this together. Never ever, as Brené Brown says, never ever should empathy begin with, well, at least you got your health. At least you're dead. That's not part of empathy. Nobody ever wants to hear that. So, the advice is, find the help you need, but never forget that, kindness will win a lot of hearts over. And then that's what we have to bring, whether you're a parent, whether you're dealing with a friend or somebody who works in your team is, try to be understanding. Don't come from a position of strength. I'm strong, you're weak, and I'm going to help fix you. That's not what people need. They need you to climb down in the hole with them a little bit and be there for them.
That's so good. Well, for those listening, if you resonate with this conversation with Adrian, I recommend you get a copy of his new book, Anxiety at Work. I put links to the book and the book's website in the show notes for the cast. So, Adrian, thank you for joining us on the People and Projects podcast.
Oh, it was my honor, Andy. Thank you.
That's officially a wrap. Man, you're fun to talk with, man.
Oh, thanks. Anytime. No, you're such a great interview. I read Jim Kouz's comment on your website, and Jim's a good friend of mine. And
is that right? Yeah, Jim's a good guy.
Jim's giving you a comment like that. Yeah, I knew that it'd be good.
Well, you also know Jim is a very generous person, so that doesn't hurt. But
he is.
You know what I was thinking with your last answer there, which I thought was you just nailed, was I think having you and Chester as a dad would be one of the most amazing gifts. But you're so amazing. It could be easy for kids to be like, I could never be like my dad. Like I could never live up to. And I just remember one conversation I had with my son once when he was struggling with something, and I told him how I struggled with the same sort of thing. He goes, I never would have thought, right? And so I wonder sometimes if people listening to us would benefit that sort of thing of like, listen, share your, well, I guess managers, it's the same sort of thing as sometimes I'm like, man, I'm not sure. I don't have all the answers, right? That was part of your message. We don't have all the answers. So I think you've got a book that's going to help a lot of people, and the timing is great. Andy. So how's it feel to be this close to it?
It's great. I mean, it's like, I don't know, we don't know, but it's like giving birth, it takes so long to get it out. And then when it comes, I don't know if it's anticlimactic or not, but it's like, okay, and so, no, thanks. And just what you were saying about, parents and stuff. I know when Chester was first having one of his sons had terrible, terrible anxiety, and the therapist told him, parents of successful parents have a higher preponderance of this because, like you say, it's a lot to live up to sometimes. So I love what you're saying about be vulnerable yourself. Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, actually, I think I felt like you modeled it really well with how you and Anthony have gone through the journey together. And I don't know, to me, it's just this area that although I feel like mental health's being talked a little bit more now, but I feel like what I love about this book is it's not mental health in general. It is in business. What do we do about it? In addition to all the professional stuff that people might need to get, but this is what's our role in it. So congratulations. High five from Chicago here to you. Thank you. Thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Oh, anytime. It's been a delight. Thanks so much.
I'll let you know when it goes live. Thanks. Take care.
Appreciate it. See you.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thank you for joining on the live stream. I could talk to Adrian for a long time. I think, this is an area where we're surrounded by people who struggle with this more than what we realize. And so getting to the point where we can learn to do this well and to have these sorts of conversations is critical. So thank you for joining for the live stream. Take care.